A mountain man buys a rejected bride with a sack on her head, but freezes when he sees her face. In the cold and quiet mountains of the West, where snow covered the land for many months and the wind never truly stopped speaking, there lived a man named Caleb Rains. He was known in nearby small towns as a strong but silent mountain man. He did not talk much, did not trust easily, and lived alone in a wooden cabin far away from crowded places. Caleb chose this life after years of working in rough mining camps and trading posts. People said he was not unfriendly, just someone who had learned that silence was safer than words. He spent most of his days chopping wood, hunting for food, and repairing his small home. The mountains were hard, but to Caleb, they were honest. Unlike people, they did not lie. One evening, when the sky was turning orange and the cold wind was growing stronger, a traveler arrived at Caleb's cabin. It was an old matchmaker named Mrs. Harlow, known for arranging unusual agreements between people who had no other place to go. She came with a strange request. Behind her stood a young woman. She wore a long, plain dress made of rough cloth, and her hands were tightly held together as if she was trying to stay calm. But what caught Caleb's attention most was the sack placed over her head. It was not tied tightly, but it covered her face completely, hiding her identity from the world. Mrs. Harlow spoke first. "This girl has no home now," she said carefully. Her village turned against her. They believe things that are not true. She needs a new place, a new start, someone who will take her in without judgment. Caleb stayed quiet. He looked at the woman standing behind the matchmaker. The wind moved around them, and for a moment, no one spoke. The mountains around them felt even quieter than usual. "I am not asking for kindness," Mrs. Harlow continued, "only agreement. She will work. She will help. She asks for nothing else." Caleb shifted his weight. He did not like sudden decisions, especially ones involving people he did not know. But winter was coming, and living alone in the mountains was not easy. A helping hand could make survival simpler. Still, something about the situation felt unusual. The woman did not speak at all. She did not even move her head. It was as if she had already accepted a life without choice. Caleb finally spoke in a low voice. "Why does she not speak for herself?" Mrs. Harlow hesitated for a moment. "She has spoken enough in places where no one listened." That answer stayed in the air like cold breath. The woman slightly lowered her head, but still said nothing. Caleb looked at his cabin behind him. Smoke rose slowly from the chimney. Inside was warmth, food, and safety, but also loneliness. Days passed without conversation. Nights were long and silent. Maybe a helper would not be a bad thing. After a long pause, Caleb nodded once. "All right," he said simply. "She can stay." Mrs. Harlow seemed relieved. She quickly took out a small paper contract and placed it on a wooden crate outside the cabin. Caleb signed it without reading too many details. He was not a man who trusted paper more than people. The deal was done. The woman, still silent, was now part of his home. Mrs. Harlow left soon after, disappearing down the mountain path before the night fully arrived. The wind became stronger and snowflakes began to fall gently, covering the ground in white. Caleb turned toward the woman. "You can remove the sack," he said quietly. She paused for a moment. Then slowly, she raised her hands and removed it. But before Caleb could see her face clearly, she turned slightly away, keeping herself hidden from the light of the lantern hanging near the door. "I will show you my face when I am ready," she said softly. Her voice was calm but carried something deep inside it, like sadness mixed with strength. Caleb did not force her. He simply nodded again. "That is fine," he replied. He opened the cabin door wider. "You can come inside. It will get colder soon." The woman stepped in slowly. Her movements were careful, as if she was entering a world she did not fully trust yet. Caleb followed her inside and closed the door behind them. Inside the cabin, the fire was burning softly. Shadows moved along the wooden walls. The woman stood near the entrance for a moment, looking around. Everything was simple. Wooden table, small kitchen area, a bed in the corner, and tools hanging neatly on the wall. Caleb pointed toward a chair near the fire. "Sit, warm yourself." She nodded and sat down quietly, keeping her hands folded in her lap. Caleb watched her for a second longer than he intended to. There was something about her silence that did not feel empty. It felt heavy, like she was carrying something unseen. Outside, the wind grew stronger, shaking the windows gently. Inside, the fire crackled softly, filling the room with warmth, but not with comfort. Because in that moment, Caleb Rains did not know that this silent agreement was only the beginning of a story that would change his life in ways he could never expect. The night in the mountain cabin grew colder after the strange arrival. Snow began falling more heavily outside, covering the ground like a thick white blanket. Inside, the fire kept burning, giving soft light and weak warmth to the wooden room. Caleb Rains stayed near the fire for a while, watching the new woman carefully. She had not spoken again since entering the cabin. She sat quietly in the chair he had offered, her hands still folded in her lap. Her face remained turned slightly away, as if she was still not ready to be fully seen. Caleb did not ask questions. He was not the kind of man who forced answers. In the mountains, patience was important. Nature never rushed, and neither did he. After a few minutes, he stood up and pointed toward a small corner of the cabin. "You can rest there," he said simply. "There is a bed." The woman looked in the direction he showed. She nodded once and stood up slowly. Her movements were careful, almost tired, as if she had traveled a long distance, not only with her feet, but also with her mind. She walked to the bed and sat down on the edge. Still, she did not fully lie down. It seemed like she was not used to safety. Caleb added more wood to the fire and then went to his own side of the cabin. He lay down on his rough bed without saying anything more. The night passed in silence. The next morning arrived with cold light and frozen air. The mountains outside were white and still. Caleb woke early, as he always did. He stepped outside for a moment, checking the weather. The wind had calmed, but the cold remained sharp. When he returned inside, he saw the woman already awake. She was standing near the small wooden table, looking at the simple tools and supplies placed there. Her head was still slightly lowered, but now she seemed more aware of her surroundings. Caleb watched her for a moment before speaking. "There is food," he said. "You can cook." She turned slightly toward him and nodded again. Without saying a word, she moved to the small cooking area. Caleb observed quietly as she worked. She did not hesitate or ask for help. She seemed to understand simple tasks quickly, as if she had done hard work before. Soon, the smell of cooked food filled the cabin. It was basic: bread, boiled potatoes, and dried meat. But it was warm and comforting in the cold mountain air. Caleb sat at the table. The woman placed a plate in front of him first, then served herself. They ate in silence. But this silence was different from before. It was not empty. It was careful, like two strangers trying to understand each other without words. Days passed in the same way. The woman stayed in the cabin and helped with daily tasks. She cleaned, cooked, and organized things without needing to be told twice. Caleb noticed that she worked harder than expected. She did not complain, even when the cold wind made simple tasks difficult. Still, she did not reveal her name. Caleb began calling her the bride in his thoughts, but never out loud. It was the only identity he had for her. At night, she remained quiet. She did not talk about her past. She did not ask about his. The cabin stayed peaceful, but there was always something unspoken between them. One afternoon, Caleb was chopping wood outside when he noticed something unusual. The woman had stepped out of the cabin without telling him. She stood a short distance away, looking at the snow-covered ground. In her hand, she held a small stick. Caleb slowed his work and watched. She knelt down and began drawing in the snow. Strange shapes appeared: circles, lines, and symbols that did not look random. They looked meaningful, like a language or memory. Caleb frowned slightly. He had never seen anything like it. After a few moments, she stopped and quickly erased the drawing with her hand, as if realizing she was being watched. She stood up and turned back toward the cabin without looking at him. Caleb did not speak, but curiosity began to grow inside him. That night, after dinner, he asked something for the first time beyond basic words. "Do you always draw like that?" he asked calmly. The woman froze slightly. The firelight flickered on her face, but she turned her head away as usual. "It is nothing," she said softly. Caleb studied her for a moment but did not push further. "All right," he replied. But inside, he knew it was not nothing. Something about her past was still alive inside her. Something she was not ready to share. As the days continued, small changes began to appear. Sometimes, at night, Caleb heard soft humming from her side of the cabin. It was a quiet tune, unfamiliar but strangely peaceful. Other times, he noticed her standing near the window, staring at the mountains as if waiting for something or remembering something far away. She never explained, and Caleb never demanded. But slowly, without realizing it, the cabin was no longer just a place of silence. It was becoming a place of questions, and in the mountains, questions often led to truths that could not stay hidden forever. The mountain storm arrived without warning. It began as a low wind in the evening, but within hours, the sky turned dark and heavy. Snow fell fast, and the wind hit the wooden cabin like it was trying to shake it apart. The trees outside bent and groaned under the pressure. Inside, the fire in the hearth burned brighter, but even its warmth felt small against the wild cold outside. Caleb Rains checked the door and windows, making sure everything was secure. He had lived through many storms before, but this one felt stronger than usual. Inside the cabin, the woman, still known silently as the bride in Caleb's mind, moved quietly around the room. She secured loose items, added wood to the fire, and made sure everything was in place without being told. Her movements were calm, but there was something different in her expression that night. She seemed alert, almost restless. Caleb noticed it, but said nothing. The storm continued to grow louder. The wind howled like it was trying to speak through the walls. Snow hit the windows in sharp bursts. The cabin creaked slightly, but held strong. Later that evening, a problem appeared. A part of the cabin roof, weakened by old snow damage, suddenly started leaking. Cold water dripped onto the wooden floor near the back corner. Caleb quickly grabbed tools and climbed onto a small wooden ladder to fix it from inside. "Hold the light steady," he said to the woman. She nodded and picked up the lantern, standing near the ladder. The firelight and lantern light mixed together, creating moving shadows across the walls. Caleb worked fast. The wind outside grew stronger and the cabin shook slightly again. The woman stood close, holding the light carefully, her eyes focused on Caleb's work. For a moment, everything seemed normal. Then it happened. A strong gust of wind hit the cabin. The lantern in her hand flickered sharply. She instinctively moved closer to help steady it. In that brief moment, the light rose higher and shone directly onto her face. Caleb looked down and froze. Time seemed to slow. Her face was finally visible, completely, clearly, without any shadow or distance. Caleb's hands stopped moving. His breath paused. For a moment, he forgot about the roof, the storm, and even the cold. He knew her, not as a stranger, but from a memory he had buried long ago. Years earlier, when Caleb worked near a mining town, he had once helped a young woman after a difficult incident in the village. She had been kind, quiet, and innocent. But soon after, false stories spread about her. People blamed her for things she did not do. Rumors grew faster than truth. And then one day, she disappeared from the town completely. Caleb had thought she left forever. But now she was standing in front of him. Alive. Real. And here. The woman saw his expression change. She slowly lowered the lantern slightly, realizing something had shifted. "You remember?" she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was emotion behind it. Fear, recognition, and something like relief mixed together. Caleb climbed down from the ladder slowly. He did not speak at first. His mind was trying to connect the past with the present. Finally, he said, "You are from Ridge Hollow." She nodded. The storm outside roared louder, but inside the cabin, everything felt still. Caleb looked at her carefully now, not as a helper or stranger, but as someone tied to a forgotten part of his life. "I heard they said you left because of trouble," he said quietly. A faint sadness passed through her eyes. "They did not let me stay," she replied. What they said was not true, but no one listened. Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. He remembered the gossip, the confusion, the way people quickly believed stories without proof. "I tried to find you after that," he said honestly. "But you were gone." The woman looked away for a moment, toward the fire. "I had nowhere to go," she said. "I stopped speaking in places where no one cared." Silence filled the cabin again, but this time it was different. It was heavy with truth. Caleb stepped closer, his voice softer now. "And the matchmaker brought you here like this?" She nodded. "I did not choose the arrangement. I had no other way to survive the winter." Caleb looked at her for a long moment. The storm outside continued, but inside, something important was changing. He finally understood why she never removed her distance completely, why she never spoke freely, why she looked at the world like she was still waiting for it to reject her again. But now he also understood something else. She was not broken. She was surviving. Caleb slowly turned toward the window. Snow pressed against the glass like a white wall. "I should have done more back then," he said quietly. The woman did not answer immediately. Then she spoke softly. "Maybe we were both just trying to survive in different ways." That sentence stayed in the air. Outside, the storm continued to rage. But inside the cabin, something new had begun. Not peace yet, but understanding. And understanding, in the mountains, was often the first step toward something stronger than silence. The storm outside the mountain cabin slowly began to weaken. The wind, which had roared like an angry beast through the night, started to calm down by early morning. Snow still covered the land in thick white layers, but the worst of the storm had passed. The world outside looked fresh and quiet, as if it had been washed clean. Inside the cabin, Caleb Rains and the woman sat in silence for a long time after their conversation from the night before. The fire had burned low, but still gave enough warmth to keep the room comfortable. Now that the truth had been spoken, things between them felt different. The silence was no longer empty or confusing. It was thoughtful, like both of them were carefully understanding what had just been revealed. The woman, Eliza, as Caleb now knew her name, finally sat with her face no longer turned away. She did not hide anymore, but she still looked uncertain, as if she was not fully used to being seen without fear. Caleb broke the silence first. "I should have spoken when things were happening back then," he said quietly. "I stayed away. I thought silence would make it better." Eliza looked at him calmly. "Silence does not stop rumors," she replied. "But I also stopped speaking for a long time. I thought no one would listen." Caleb nodded slowly. He understood that now. Outside, a soft light began to appear as the morning sun tried to break through the clouds. The mountains looked peaceful again, but inside the cabin, something deeper was changing. For the first time, they were not strangers sharing a space. They were two people connected by a shared past that neither of them had fully understood before. Eliza stood up and walked toward the window. She looked outside at the snow-covered land. "I did not think I would end up here," she said softly. Caleb stood beside her but kept a respectful distance. "Neither did I," he replied. A small silence followed. Not uncomfortable, just natural. Then Eliza spoke again. "When I was taken from my village, I thought my life was over," she said. "I believed I would always be treated like I did something wrong." Caleb listened carefully. "But here," she continued, "you did not treat me like that. Even when I did not speak, you did not force me. That is something I did not expect." Caleb looked slightly surprised by her words. He did not see himself as special. He had simply given her space. "I did not know what else to do," he said honestly. "You did not ask for help, but you also did not run away. So I just let you be." Eliza gave a faint smile for the first time since arriving. It was small, but real. "That is more kindness than I have seen in a long time," she said. The firecracker used to help others, and how quickly people turned against her when rumors spread. She spoke about leaving in the middle of the night, carrying only what she could hold. Caleb listened without interrupting. For the first time in a long time, Eliza felt like someone was truly hearing her. In return, Caleb also opened up slowly. He spoke about his years working in mining camps, the dangers he faced, and why he chose to live alone in the mountains. He shared how he had grown tired of places where trust was easily broken. As they talked more, something unexpected began to grow between them. Not romance, not instantly, but understanding. A quiet respect built from shared honesty. One afternoon, Caleb repaired the roof properly with Eliza's help. She worked beside him without hesitation. They moved like a team, no longer strangers sharing space, but people building something together. While they worked, Eliza looked at him and said, "Do you ever think about leaving this place?" Caleb paused for a moment. He looked at the wide mountains around them. "I used to think I would stay alone forever," he said, "but maybe not anymore." Eliza did not ask what he meant. She simply continued working beside him. As winter slowly started to lose its strength, the cabin began to feel less like a place of survival and more like a home. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains and painted the sky in soft orange colors, Eliza stood outside the cabin. Caleb joined her quietly. The cold air was gentle now, not harsh. Eliza looked at the horizon and said softly, "I thought my life ended when I was rejected." Caleb stood beside her and replied, "Maybe it did, but sometimes endings are just beginnings we don't understand yet." Eliza glanced at him, and this time there was no fear in her eyes, only calm acceptance. The wind moved gently through the mountains. The snow began to melt slowly under the changing season. And in that quiet moment, in a place once filled with silence and uncertainty, two people stood together, not as strangers anymore, but as survivors of their past, stepping carefully into a new beginning built on truth, trust, and understanding.